Good morning. It is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. You can now relax and be informed. Here is your daily bite of news. An update on a previous bit of news. Russian President Vladimir Putin bestowed a $1.5 billion loan on Belarus on Monday, September 14th, after its leader Alexander Lukashenko flew to the Black Sea resort to ask for additional support. It comes a day after more than 100,000 protesters took to the streets for the fifth straight weekend to demand Lukashenko's resignation. Hours earlier, Russian news agencies reported Moscow was also sending paratroopers for joint exercises in Belarus. Opposition candidate Svetlana Tyanowska said no agreement reached by Lukashenko with Putin would be valid. The West has trodden carefully over the issue, balancing sympathy with the pro-democracy movement against fear of provoking Russian intervention. Another update. In Berlin, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is able to breathe on his own, has successfully been removed from mechanical ventilation, and can briefly leave his hospital bed, his doctor said on Monday. Navalny was kept in an induced coma after his poisoning for more than a week as he was treated with an antidote. More than 24 phones belonging to members of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team were wiped clean of data before the Justice Department's Inspector General could comb through them for records, the DOJ said in records released Thursday. Including mobile phones that were reassigned, the Special Counsel's office wiped a total of 31 phones. A lot of team members claim to have accidentally wiped their phones by entering wrong passwords or claiming the systems did it without their assistance. Phones issued to at least 3 other Mueller prosecutors, Kyle Freeney, Rush Atkinson, and senior prosecutor Greg Andre, were also wiped of data. Additionally, the cell phones of FBI lawyer Lisa Page was misplaced by the Special Counsel's office. While it was eventually obtained by the DOJ Inspector General, by that point Lisa Page's phone had been restored to its factory settings, wiping all of the data. In March of last year, Mueller submitted his final report to Attorney General William Barr on the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. The report, a redacted version, concluded that the Trump campaign did not conspire with Russians to influence the election, but said investigators could not reach a conclusion on whether President Trump committed obstruction of justice. The perfectly preserved remains of an Ice Age cave bear could be as much as 39,500 years old, have been discovered in the Russian Arctic, the first example of the species ever to be found with soft tissues and internal organs intact. The astonishing find was made by reindeer herders in Russia's far north. The bear became extinct some 15,000 years ago. Significant discoveries including mammoths, woolly rhinos, Ice Age foal, several puppies, and cave lion cubs have been made in Siberia in recent years as the permafrost melts. Biologists at New Mexico State University are trying to find out why hundreds of thousands of migratory birds have been found dead. The mystery started August 20th with the discovery of a larger number of dead birds at the U.S. Army White Sands Missile Range and White Sands National Monument. What was first believed to be an isolated incident turned out to be a much more serious problem when hundreds more dead birds were found in regions across the state. Dead warblers, bluebirds, sparrows, blackbirds, and western wood, pewee, and flycatchers are also being found in Colorado, Texas, and Mexico. Residents and biologists reported seeing birds acting strangely before they died. One of the factors biologists believe may have contributed to the deaths of the birds is the wildfires burning in California and western states, which may have forced the birds into early migration before they were ready. However, scientists have been seeing isolated mortalities in August, so something else has been going on aside from weather events. The birds will be sent to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Forensic Laboratory in Oregon for necropsies and to determine their cause of death, but it could take weeks to get results. Scientists have been seeing a loss of 3 billion birds in the U.S. since 1970 and a tremendous decline in insects, signaling that climate change could be playing a role in this. According to the Bloomberg Green Environmental Data Watch page, Spokane, Washington has the most air pollution on the planet in sensor range on this morning, September 15th, 2020, due to the smoke from fires. The following are remarks transcribed from the President Trump briefing on wildfires in McLennan Park, California on September 14th with Governor of California Gavin Newsom. President Trump said, "Great to be here. Great to be with the governor. We've been speaking a lot about the problem, and it's a big problem, and it'll get solved. We are giving unwavering support for the people of California, and I have to say for the state of Washington and Oregon. The governor of California called me up, and we immediately signed the declaration, and I want to thank all of the FEMA people for doing such a great job. In August, I approved a major disaster declaration for California. I've approved, I think, Gavin, about 40 Stafford Act declarations. So very quickly, because we want this thing taken care of, including fire management assistant grants to help multiple states stop fires." After the president's speech, Governor Newsom took the floor. And he said, "It's great to have you back here in the state, Mr. President. Thank you for being here, in particular, with 2 of the Coast Guard's aircrafts that we're now bringing into the California family that are being retrofitted, these C-130s. Just another example of the partnership between the federal government and the state of California. That partnership, of course, extended with the incredible collaborative spirit of FEMA. About a month ago, literally to the day, we began to have a series of 14,000 lightning strikes over a 3-day period. 1,100 fires have sparked in the last month. 2.8 million acres just in the last 30 days have burned. Unprecedented in California history. 3.2 million over the course of this calendar year. We can agree to disagree, and I appreciate your frame on the politics of this, but let me just acknowledge 2 things briefly. There's no question, when you look past this decade and looking past almost 1,000 plus years, that we have not done justice on our forest management. I don't think anyone disputes that. I want to acknowledge we have our U.S. forest representatives here. The state of California, your administration, just entered into a first-of-its-type commitment over the next 20 years to double our vegetation management and forest management. But one thing is fundamental. 57% of the land in this state is federal forest land. 3% is California. So we really do need that support. We need that emphasis on engagement, and we are fully committed to working with you to advance that cause. When we're having heat domes, the like of which we've never seen in our history, the hottest August ever in history, the ferocity of these fires, the drought, 5+ years of it, losing 163 million trees to that drought, something has happened to the plumbing of the world. And we come from a perspective, humbly, where we can submit the science is in and observed evidence is self-evident that climate change is real and that it's exacerbating this. We're sharing maps, we're sharing resources, we're prioritizing, we're doubling the number of acres, federally managed, state managed. And I will say just humbly, we got to double it still, meaning the partnership was significant. It was the first in California's history with the U.S. government. After his remarks, the president said, "That's something I feel so strongly about. You can knock this down to nothing. You know, you go to Europe and different places in Europe, countries where there's forest countries, and they're very, very strong on management, and they don't have a problem. They really don't have with, as I say, more explosive trees than we have in California. So thank you very much for your comments, but we're working on that very hard together, and I think we're totally in sync. I really think we're totally in sync." Later on, he mentioned, "You just watch, it'll start getting cooler." The meeting continued, where President Trump discussed fine details of the fire conservation crisis with California officials, such as the need to put in miles of cut lines to stop the fires, the dried-out beetle-kill trees' flammable effect that accrued from years of drought, the extreme density of forests since the 1930s, damage to essential power systems like the Big Creek hydroelectric, and FEMA's efforts in the area. Both Governor Newsom and President Trump engaged in respectful conversation that included both men hailing their good relationship. This surprised many in media since Trump and Newsom have butted heads repeatedly during both men's first terms in office in the past years. California has relied, though, heavily on aid from federal government to respond to the crisis and balance its budget. That gentleness in approach does not necessarily extend to others in Newsom's administration. Wade Crowfoot, Newsom's Natural Resource Secretary, implored Trump and his administration to not put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, referencing the state's rising temperatures that are making wildfires more destructive. At the meeting, when Trump said, "It'll start getting cooler, you just watch," Crowfoot responded, "I wish science agreed with you." Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris is traveling to California on Tuesday to get a briefing on the fires, and presidential nominee Joe Biden also has begun focusing on climate change. Biden's campaign proposal includes a detailed $2 trillion plan to stave off the worst of climate change by reducing burning of fossil fuels over the next several decades. That includes boosting U.S. production of electric cars, eliminating carbon pollution from the nation's power sector, and retrofitting millions of U.S. buildings for greater energy efficiency. Biden points not just to wildfires in the West and hurricanes along the Gulf Coast, but to droughts affecting farmers in the Midwest and even climate-related threats to U.S. military installations around the world as underscoring their urgency. Colorado State also is battling a few fires of their own, though relatively in less densely populated areas. The Cameron Peak Fire in the mountains west of Fort Collins, Colorado, has burned 102,596 acres, making it the fifth largest wildfire in Colorado history. It remains at 4% containment as of Monday. High-severity fires leave behind massive burn areas with almost nothing alive. Baby trees simply can't regrow in the increased heat and drought brought on by climate change. A new study led by the University of Colorado Boulder also finds large parts of the southern Rocky Mountains will become unsuitable for ponderosa pine and Douglas fir tree regrowth as the climate continues to warm. For areas that can't regenerate, research has found that many instead convert to grasslands. Camille Stevens-Rahman, also of Colorado State University, says there can be lots of benefits to having patches of grasslands between forested areas, but it's a problem where we're talking about tens of thousands of acres that have transitioned from forest to grasslands. One major concern is that trees sequester carbon. Fewer trees will capture less carbon, which means more warming and therefore fewer trees, in a cycle that will make it hard to reach carbon neutrality. Stevens-Rahman has studied a large range of burned forest across the West and found some areas no longer able to support the same trees that have been there for 1 or 2 centuries. We're really moving away from the suitable climate for tree regeneration to happen, she says. She wants to emphasize that Colorado, the state, is not losing all of its forests. Some trees like aspen and oak do better with regrowth after a fire. Lodgepole pine forests, such as what's been burning in the Cameron Peak Fire north of Rocky Mountain National Park, have also been found to recover better than some lower elevation trees. What, she says, we may have to accept is in this new and changing world is that these ecosystems are going to look different than the ones that maybe we have grown fond of in the past. In July, House and Senate Republicans came together to unveil a new Roosevelt Conservation Caucus, an environmentalist initiative named for the Republican president, early conservationalist Teddy Roosevelt. The formation of the Roosevelt Caucus signaled the beginning of a new era in conservative politics, characterized by a heightened concern for environmental issues such as climate change. The conservative environmental group puts the focus on statecraft and state stewardship to combat climate change. They would rather roll back cumbersome bureaucratic rules and streamline the development of clean energy projects by removing regulatory hurdles to development. The prominent Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus in the House of Representatives now counts 23 Republicans among its members, and polls show that Republican voters, particularly younger ones, are increasingly likely to see climate change as a serious problem. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy presented a series of Republican environmentalist bills dedicated to clean energy innovation and carbon capture technology. Although McCarthy's proposals drew some criticism from conservative activist groups, they nonetheless reflect the growing number of Republicans interested in addressing a wide range of environmental issues. Unfortunately, says Kuehl Robinson, the governmental affairs director of the American Conservation Coalition, the right has been absent from this conversation for a while. In China, they launched a tree planting program in 1978 to protect regions affected by sandstorms sweeping out of the Gobi Desert. The Tree North Shelter Forest program aimed to grow 87 million acres of new trees, a forest the size of Germany, across the country's north by 2050. Despite setbacks and program problems, today in 2020, forest coverage has officially increased since 1978, from 12% to about 22%. NASA satellite images confirm that China is in this regard a world leader for afforestation. Since 2004, about 170 China cities have launched Forest City campaigns designed to green urban areas and curb pollution. Each city has added an average of 13,000 acres of parks or woods per year. The plan is to cover 40% of China's urban land with trees and green spaces in about 7 out of 10 cities by the end of the decade. The second phase of the newer Beijing Sandstorm Source Control Project calls for 85% of the dedicated land to be given over to natural forestation, an approach that cordons off degraded land and allows vegetation to grow back naturally. Officials have also recognized the importance of involving local communities. Many former tree planting projects failed because of neglect. So the Alaskan Foundation set up a program that pays farmers to plant 100 million trees in Inner Mongolia. If you talk to farmers about climate change, they don't understand it. But if the project brings economic benefit and also makes their environment better, then it's much easier for them to get on board, says Alaskan Sun. In the meantime, Beijing has said it plans to export tree planting programs to other countries under the Belt and Road Initiative, which includes more than 130 nations. According to the government-affiliated China Green Foundation, 3 green economic belts will be created by 2030 that link China with countries in Central and West Asia, including Iran, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, and Turkey. The tree of choice for the program will be poplar. The British government has condemned an Iranian court's decision to bring new charges against Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, the British-Iranian charity worker jailed on espionage charges 4 years ago. Zaghari was arrested at Tehran airport in April 2016, accused by the Iranian government of working with organizations allegedly attempting to overthrow the regime, a claim that she and her family have consistently denied. Iranian state media reported Tuesday that Zaghari and her defense lawyer were summoned to the Branch 15 court to face new charges, but provided no further details. It remains unclear what the new charges might entail. Her husband, Richard, has urged the British government to do everything to protect his wife, who he says is being held hostage by the regime. This starts with the British embassy insisting it is able to attend her trial on Sunday and that the UK's diplomatic protection is treated with respect. The following is an opinion by Joe Biden on how he would approach U.S.-Iran relations. When Donald Trump ran for president, he promised a better deal to constrain Iran's nuclear program and pledged to pressure Tehran into curbing its aggressive behavior across the Middle East. Like so many of President Trump's promises, these proved to be just empty words. This past month has proven that Trump's Iran policy is a dangerous failure. At the United Nations, Trump cannot rally a single one of America's closest allies to extend the UN arms embargo on Iran. We urgently need to change course. President Trump has repeatedly ratcheted up tensions, risking bringing us closer to another Middle Eastern war without a realistic strategy or endgame. President Trump has lurched into risky escalations that endangered our troops and then downplayed their brain injuries as headaches. Trump's policies have pushed Russia and China closer to Iran while reducing transatlantic relations to their lowest point in decades. When tensions spiked earlier this year, instead of rallying to America's side, our European allies called for all parties to exercise utmost restraint and responsibility. Other world powers now devote their energies to opposing U.S. policy instead of working alongside us to counter Tehran. This mix of confrontation and isolation will leave us with the worst of both worlds. Instead of restoring deterrence, Trump has emboldened Iran. Instead of ending endless wars, Trump has repeatedly brought America to the brink of a new one. Here is what I would do as president. First, I will make an unshakable commitment to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Second, I will offer Tehran a credible path back to diplomacy if Iran returns to strict compliance with the nuclear deal. This includes working aggressively to free unjustly detained Americans and calling out the regime for its ongoing violations of human rights, including the execution of wrestler Naveed Afkari this week, And we will work to help our partners reduce tensions and help end regional conflicts, including the disastrous war in Yemen. And on day one, I will repeal Trump's disgraceful travel ban targeting a number of Muslim-majority countries, among others. Third, we will continue to push back against Iran's destabilizing activities, which threaten our friends and partners in the region. If Iran chooses confrontation, I am prepared to defend our vital interests and our troops. But I am ready to walk the path of diplomacy if Iran takes steps to show it is ready too. That will be all for this smoky, fire-fueled day. To read more on any of these current event topics, see our description for sources below. Subscribe to this channel to receive a daily news update. Thank you for listening. Be relaxed, be informed, be connected.